I'm really glad to have Kristof Van Tomme joining me on stage. Hello, Kristof. How are you?
Hi, Mehdi. Good morning.
Yeah, good morning. Thank you very much for being with us. And I'm really glad that you opened the Open API technology track with a title that is quite intriguing, the Interface Manifesto. The stage is yours for opening this track. Enjoy your time. And yes, if you have any questions for Kristof, you can ask them in the chat. Thank you, Kristof.
Thank you, Mehdi. Thank you. So, good morning, everyone. I'm both at the same time really excited and also a little bit nervous about this presentation. Normally, I don't get too nervous anymore about presentations, but this one is kind of special because well, it's more than a year now, I've been chewing on this topic, and I've brought it up with a couple of different people, trying to figure out how to best approach this. But then, yeah, we need a good fire to actually get to an outcome. So with this, I think I've got a good enough point to kick off the topic and to start exploring it. First, a very small word about myself. So I'm Kristof Van Tomme. I'm the CEO of Pronovix. In this presentation, next 20 minutes or 19 minutes, I'll try to explain why I believe that we as an ecosystem, the API space as an ecosystem, needs a manifesto. And I'll propose a way of going about creating it. It's a very short word about the company that I work for. Our company is called Pronovix. We're a dev portal specialist. That's all we do. We've done a lot of research about how to make developer portals, and we've shared a lot of it for free on our blog and on a bunch of community events. We organize API Docs, which is a free community event, where we had the API Docs track yesterday here at the Apidays. So we collaborate a lot together with the team. And we also organized the Dev Portal Awards. If you want to know what makes great developer portals in 2021, or maybe even 2022, I'd recommend you to come and attend the awards gala that's going to happen on the 15th of December. It's part 2. We already had a first part, but if you want to see who's the overall best dev portal of the year according to our jury and a couple of other categories, you should come and visit. Anyway, enough about us. Let's talk about this topic, API, interface manifesto. I think, I don't know if you think about this. I'm sure you do, but I really am a sucker for abstract thinking and meta thinking, and kind of figuring out what is it that we're doing here, and what's the purpose of everything that we're doing. And I think one of the key things that I've been thinking a lot about is how do APIs impact organizations? What is it really that is going on when an organization implements an API program? I know often organizations will start from we're trying to become more efficient, we want to reuse certain software that we're building, we want to improve developer experience, maybe we want to set up some sort of community or something like that. But and those are all interesting outcomes that we're trying to reach. But how is that transforming the organization itself? Also, how are APIs impacting individuals? How are APIs changing the world for both the end consumers of APIs, the people that are using the applications that are being built with APIs, and the people that are creating the applications using APIs, and maybe also the people that are creating the APIs themselves. Often we're looking at developer experience as the impact that we're trying to get. So we're trying to improve the developer experience so that it will become easier to create applications. But how does that? But what other impacts do APIs have on a more meta level? How does it restructure our being in organizations and our being in the world? And then last but not least, how do APIs impact government and wider society? Because there's a lot of opportunities that we have with APIs and with interfaces more in general. And it's I think important to think about what we're doing and how we're restructuring our society around us to make sure that we don't get unintended outcomes. Because what is the impact that we would like our APIs and our work to have on the world? Are there certain failure states that we really want to avoid at all costs? Are there certain nice, interesting outcomes that we really want to try to strive for? I think a lot of this is oblique, so we can't just strive for something specifically. We need to do it in a little bit of a circumspect way. But still, I think it's important to understand what's going on so that we can maybe foresee some of the outcomes and unintended and intended consequences that might happen. So to answer these three questions, I think we need to look at we need to look a little bit higher. We need to look at organizations from information flow perspective and from here comes the big word, a complexity perspective. Because typically organizations are focusing on very tangible objectives, like, we want to go faster, we want to make more money, we want to, increase our diversification or something like that. But I think that APIs, in fact, are about becoming more adaptive and becoming even more complex adaptive systems, or better harmonized, or better like organizations that are better in coherence with themselves, with their participants, and with the world as a whole. I have a suspicion that what's really going on with APIs, that the true transformation that we are affecting on the world is something very similar to something that we can recognize and that we start to discover when we look at how biological systems are built up. There's a really interesting book, Biological Autonomy, that is to some extent based on Alicia Guerrero's work about enabling constraints, that talks about this concept that I thought really fascinating, which is the rise of dynamic decoupled layers. So where you have, it's a lot of hand waving, a lot of complexity. I won't go too deep into it, but basically it's about how something like, for example, the nervous system evolves. Because if you think about it, a nervous system, one hand is about sensoric neurons. It's about sensing what's going on in the world. It's about acting in the world. And then this direct objective, sensing and acting, also resulted in thinking, and also enabled thinking, which was like a whole new layer of being that enabled organisms to have completely different behaviors. And the interesting thing is that layer is connected and is embedded in the layer below, into like the tissues and the cells, but it is also to some extent decoupled. Anyway, that's very abstract. It's probably a little bit too early for that, but I believe that there's some deeper, much bigger truth, and there's something really fascinating and interesting that we're doing when we're building APIs, and being aware of that and trying to understand it before it becomes, or while it becomes, probably can help us to steer towards outcomes that are going to be better for the people that we're working with. Because I believe this change is happening already. We can see it all around us. Like, we all have a phone in our pockets today that is using APIs to do things that would sound like magic for anybody a couple of decades ago. But how can we navigate that landscape so that we don't, that we don't get disrupted ourselves, so that our organizations don't get disrupted? How can we make sure that we can stay on top of the wave rather than in front of it? I think that's, to be able to do that, we have to understand more fundamentally what is going on. Because if we don't, I think we risk doing local optimizations, which which are not going to bring us where we need to be successful. For example, last year I started seeing that in conversations with customers, I started seeing that there's a more distinct differentiation between two subgroups in the API space. On one hand, there's the internal crowd, the people that are trying to automate and make things more efficient. I think Gartner calls it the paved roads to production. On the other hand, there's the external facing, the differentiation crowd, people that are trying to build ecosystems and marketplaces. And I think, I'm not 100% sure, but I feel that until this year, companies were still trying to achieve both at the same time when they were doing their API program. It still is so. Like, companies are still talking about trying to achieve both. But there's a stronger focus on either or, I feel, and there's the expectation that these are distinct efforts. So companies now come to us talking about an internal dev portal versus an external dev portal much more separately than they used to. Like, I think it's good that these are separate things because they serve different purposes. But I think that there's still something that needs to connect them, because when you this split up between two worlds is very similar to the bimodal IT concepts that Gartner started promoting a while ago. Now, this picture is not how they currently promote it. This is from a little while ago. I found it in an article that Chris Daniel wrote on the three economies concept. I'll explain that in a moment. But it's this idea that you have the people that are trying to optimize things and are trying to reduce cost, and then there's the people that are trying to differentiate and are trying to improve the competitiveness of the organization, and that these are two separate efforts. Yesterday on Mark Burghar's talk on the fourth stage, the stage where we talked about developer portals and API documentation and complexity, Mark explains how the three economies model that Jay Bloom has been talking about explains how there's these two economies. There's the differentiation economy and the scale economy, two very different worlds where people are trying to do very different things. And that the way to bridge the gap between these two is to develop a scope economy. Like, you've heard this as a platform. You've heard mentioned people talk about this as the platform, or the API infrastructure that at the same time helps the organization to differentiate and to become more resilient. And I believe that we need to be careful that we keep our focus on this aspect, that this is what we are trying to achieve. Like, at the same time, we need to have early successes, but we also have to keep our eye, kind of like keeping two ideas in mind at the same time. Small scale, get something done, but also big scale, what is the ultimate objective that we're going for? And that is, I believe, with APIs, to build the infrastructure that supports both adaptation and resilience. Not either or, but both at the same time. And a really important part to this, and this was a conversation. Well, it was on Twitter. I had a conversation with Abhinav Ashtana from Postman, who had written a post about how he imagines that basically developer portals no longer have a place in the API ecosystem, that Postman is going to replace that. That basically we're going to go from API documentation as a product to API documentation as a service, like, the industrialization of API documentation. And it's a very interesting concept. Of course, I have opinions because we're a dev portal company, but I believe that there's a risk there beyond my commercial interests, that we might forget that an API program is also about the creation of a set of affordances that will help and a set of affordances, meaning that it's about changing how people think about the organization and how you get things done, and actually building the technology to get that change done. Because if we don't keep that in mind, there's a big risk that we'll end up in a similar situation as what we have today with Confluence Wiki, where you have a hugely commercially successful application that every organization pretty much is using, especially in enterprise, but that everybody is really upset and disappointed in because it's not fulfilling the promise that it has made. And I'm worried that we might end up in that situation with APIs as a whole if we just blindly follow this route. If we just unwittingly follow this route. Another example of how this could go wrong if we don't know what we're doing, or maybe in this case more an opportunity for change that we can grasp if we know where we're going, is how APIs could help us to adapt to a faster changing world. Because today's model of dealing with change is still focused on basically reorganization of organizations, at least in large organizations. There's part of the processing of the information that a company absorbs is happening through the management structures and the management networks that are adapted to deal with a certain type of information really well, but that can't really always deal with certain new information because just the network topology of management actually cancels out certain messages that are really important, that can be life or death for organizations. Like there's a really interesting book, I think it's called The Silo Effect. I should have written it down, but if somebody is interested, just give me a ping, where the author talks about how some really, really bad stuff happens when organizations are not able to process the information that they actually have. And so large organizations have a lot of information, but sometimes just because of the way that they're structured, they can't process it and actually make sense of it. And I believe that there's an opportunity for APIs to become, to help organizations to transition a power from these management hierarchies that are that are slow in evolving, that require reorganizations to change, to more dynamic flows of information that could help us to organize how we work together with the teams around us. And these sound maybe very different, but basically these are both about the same thing. Basically, they are about how can we help organizations to become deliberately complex. Not just complexity as a bad thing we try to eliminate, but complexity as a good thing in the right place that we try to help and foster where it is useful. Living systems do this all the time. This is, for example, in your gut, you've got the microbiome that is interacting with your immune system, that is helping us to deal with all the complexity of the world around us. I believe that APIs are similar boundary systems that can help us to become more complex adaptive as organizations and as society. Oh, and I believe that it's possible to that way build deliberately complex socio-technical systems where we don't just accidentally remove complexity whenever we find it, or we don't just unwittingly try to remove complexity because it's a bad thing, or and then we have complexity all in the places where it's useful by accident, but that we become conscious about where should we have complexity and where shouldn't we. Do you want to help figure this out? Do you want to help work on this manifesto? From January, we'll be interviewing people for the API Resilience podcast. I've been a little bit on a hiatus. I was working on this presentation and a couple of other things, but from January, I want to start interviewing people again around complexity and APIs. And then I hope that by December next year, this conference, we'll be able to present the insights from the community that we've gathered through those interviews in this manifesto, the Interface Manifesto. If you're interested in this, or if you just want to learn more about complexity and APIs, I've set up, or my colleague set up a new mailing list for applied complexity, which is, it's going to be at the same time like well, we'll see, hopefully a live unconference, but we'll see how COVID evolves. But an event where we'll talk about APIs and complexity at the same time, and where we'll also talk about some of these topics. And if you're on that list, you'll also hear about the opportunities to come on the podcast and to help us think these topics through. And that's it for my presentation.
Yeah, thank you very much, Kristof. One question: why biology comparisons with APIs?
Because, well, I'm a bioengineer, so it comes natural to me.
That's a good reason.
But I believe biology evolved to deal with complexity, like nature evolved to deal with complexity. That's the whole thing, and it's actually, and you like even so. I had that in my presentation yesterday, but when you add a living system, a living being into a non-living thing, it becomes complex. And actually, you see this happening a lot in nature, where an organism creates non-living structures on the outside to support it. But where's the boundary between the living system, the biological thing, and the technological thing? It's not clear. It's like coral reefs. There's a really small animal that is living in symbiosis with algae, but it's creating this whole ecosystem for fishes and so on. So I think there's a lot to learn, because we are biological ourselves, even if we sometimes forget it. And I think that it's a way to also make more humane technology, if we acknowledge the biological nature of the socio-technical systems we build.
Last question: do you make a difference between complex system or complicated systems? You know, it depends about how you speak English. Not you, but at least in French English, it's different. But the thing is, complex would mean something that you can't really untangle. There's no. It's when you touch it, you don't know what are the consequences. Where complicated means like you could untangle it if you would do it enough. Do you think API can resolve just one of them or both?
Very interesting question. I think if you can deal with complexity, you automatically can deal with complicatedness, because the complexity is harder. I think that the danger is to create complicated systems. So I think we try to reduce the complexity of systems, to reduce them into complicatedness, but that results in not really nice outcomes in suboptimal systems, I think. So I hope that we can use APIs to build complex systems, because that's going to be better for us as humans. It will, like right now, a lot of work environments are kind of like machines, and if we could use APIs for complexity, we could make them more human friendly and a better place to be.
Yeah, but the thing that at some point, there is a famous saying I like, is that accidental complexity is never accidental. We let it happen. At some point, we let it happen. So, but do you like, what would you advise for thinking APIs, interfaces, affordances, like software designed to be used, not just to represent what the system is capable to do? What's really doable in terms of, let's say, I would not say agility, but yeah, we can say agility, but in a sense on the biological term, right? Like the flows for data flows and evolution, and like how would you advise a company to address that?
I think the key is to keep thinking about the people in the machine. Like basically what we're doing is we're creating a layer in between two people systems, two biological systems. And we forget that. We just look at the API and say like, oh, here's some technology. but it's not technology. It's a social technical system, because on the inside, there's a team building that API, and on the outside, there's people that are trying to use the API. If at any point you kid yourself and you start thinking that it's just a machine, that's when you go off the rails. So I think that the core thing is keep remembering there's humans on the outside and the inside, and you need to adapt the system to those humans.
Yeah, it's really funny you talk about this, because there's a famous doctor called Bichat. It's a French doctor in the 19th century who said that the body is a machine. So we will treat everything as a machine, and we don't consider, let's say, whatever the spiritual aspect, the brain or whatever. It's just like wires and liquid and, you know, like pumps. It's just a machine, right? And so we made a lot of improvements in medicine thanks to him, but we reached a limit that we could not overtake, right? Are you saying the same thing? If we treat the companies just as a software to software interactions, we're missing something?
Yes, because we're looking at it analytically, and we there's the quote, you know, like a system. If you break a system apart into its components, you have a bunch of dead components that don't fulfill the function anymore of the system. And I think it's very similar that when we look at organizations as machines, we don't just do a disservice to the people that are working with that machine. We lose our resilience, because it's complexity, complex adaptiveness that makes systems resilient. So I think this is something that the analytical mindset of the scientific movement has been super useful. We've learned a lot of things, but it's also been our detriment, because we're trying to reduce complexity everywhere, and we do it unwittingly, just bulldoze everything, and the result is that you end up with brittle systems. So you build a company, you optimize it like for crazy, it becomes this huge thing. You optimize until actually you kill it, because now you've optimized it in such a way that it's no longer adaptive. And thinking from, okay, becoming deliberate about this. Where do we need complexity? How do we make this something that is human, not just for the wishy-washy kumbaya feeling, but like for both very clear business reasons? Because if we don't do that, we're just going to destroy what we have. And the cycle is speeding up. So, you know, you could have your lifetime benefiting from some system that was a finite game, but that's no longer going to be the case very soon. Like at some point, we have to start playing infinite games. And I think that's what we need to do with APIs.
Perfect, Kristof. Thank you very much for this great opening. Looking forward to see the evolution of the interface manifesto.
Thank you for great questions, as always.
Thank you very much.